ICEPG meeting, and I would like everybody to introduce themselves. So this is introduction, and I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Bonnie Kwok. I'm Business Development and Conservation Team Leader, also passionate in youth engagement and public art. And then I'm going to move to Lillian.
Hi, Ben and Greg. I'm Lillian Watson. I work within Greater Cambridge Shared Planning, and I work with Bonnie on youth engagement services and then public art activities as well. It's nice to meet you both.
You too.
Yeah. Tom?
Tom can't hear us.
Oh, Tom can't hear us.
No.
Yeah, I think he dropped in the chat that he's struggling with his audio.
Oh no. Okay, so I can introduce Tom. Tom Davis is our senior urban designer, and he works on strategic sites as well. He's the manager of our design review panel, and he's worked with Carmark before on a high-profile project in Phillimore, which is the life science. Sorry, in Foxton, and it's a very high-profile project. And then Janine Richardson.
Hi, thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, I'm Janine Richardson. I'm a principal planner in our strategic sites team, alongside our NSIP team. Deal on larger sites, mainly on the Eddington site at the moment, which is a university development on the northwest side of Cambridge.
So today's talk is highly relevant to your role, I guess, Janine.
Well, to be fair, I'm not that involved in NSIP, but it will be helpful, yeah.
Thank you. And then we have Teresa.
Hi, I'm a Section 106 Monitoring Officer for the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, and I cover both the City Council and South Cambridgeshire District Council.
Thank you. Maxine?
Hello, yeah, I'm Maxine Ross. I work for the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service as well. I do the support work for 2 teams.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mary.
Hello, morning, afternoon. Hello, yes, I'm a senior planner in the West team, so I work in development management.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce Ben and Greg. They're directors at Carmark, an employee-owned communications and stakeholder engagement agency that works across the built environment and has a particular strength in NSIPs and working with the promoters of major infrastructure proposals. Carmark's NSIP work spans energy, water, waste, pipelines, ports and rail terminals, and tracks back to 2008 and the creation of the Development Consent Order regime under the Planning Act 2008. Ben is a managing director, and his experience includes NSIPs at Daventry International Rail Freight Terminal, various pipeline projects for the National Grid, and a Yorkshire Potash Mine scheme in Whitby. Greg is a senior board director whose work project includes Anglian Water, working with both National Highways and Heathrow Airport, and electricity network projects with both National Grid and GreenGen in Wales. Carmark's approach to infrastructure consenting is always to look strategically at the operational objective as defined by the national policy statements and through the lens of the local community, which is really important, and they're really good at that. Balancing national need with local benefit is invariably the starting point, which is where the title of this talk comes in, as you can see on the screen. As well as drawing on the consultancy and project experience, Ben and Greg are members of the National Infrastructure Planning Association, NIPA, where Greg serves on the NIPA Council. Closer to home, in the GCSP patch, Carmark is working on a number of communities and supporting DCO proposals that include Anglian Water's Fence Reservoir. The stage is yours.
Bonnie, that's very kind. One quick question. I wasn't sure whether Lillian shared the screen or Greg. So
it's
I don't
me,
know.
Ben, yeah.
Yeah, fine. Okay, I've got the co-pilot blurb showing on my screen, Greg. I'm not sure if that's just me, but Bonnie, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a nice opportunity, Bonnie, to return the favour and do a talk for you and your team after you very kindly did one for us earlier this year, talking all about the Youth Engagement Service and the YES team. So grateful for the opportunity. It's also very timely. I'm not sure how closely members of the team on the call have been following it, but we've had quite a lot washing through under the Planning and Infrastructure Act changes in recent weeks, including specific guidance for DCO promoters, and we'll touch on some of that and what it means and how it changes things as we go. Just to set out a little bit on what we're going to try and cover today, it's a sort of quasi agenda. These are the headings really to give people a bit of a feel. We'll give, I mean, you've very kindly given us a bit of an introduction, but we'll do a little bit of introduction, Bonnie. We'll recap, I think usefully, helpfully, on how the whole NSIP DCO regime started, just a quick retrospective, how it's evolved and how it continues to evolve, as I say, with changes coming in under this government. We'll then talk specifically about engagement, and we'll give some examples, and then we'll get into some insights, hopefully, that might be useful and provocative for the purposes of this conversation. So I think we've got around about a dozen slides. You gave us 20 minutes to aim for, Bonnie, so we'll go at a reasonable pace, and I think time for questions is allocated at the end.
Ben, can I just say that, can I just ask everyone, once when the presentation is finished, we can have a, we can unshare that presentation, and then we have everybody switch on the camera, so we can have a group photo, because as always, we want to do some PR to promote partnership working. So can I ask colleagues to switch on the camera after the presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you very much. So, Greg, can you click us on to the next one if you would? So, you've kind of given us an introduction, Bonnie. I don't wish to repeat all of that, but yeah, my name is Ben Copithorne. I'm the managing director at Camargue. I've been working in Camargue and in built environment communications for 28 years. And as you've said, I've worked on a number of DCOs and NSIPs covering everything from energy to logistics and ports. So bring that experience to the table, but also bring wider experience. And we'll touch on some of the things that we know and do outside of DCOs and NSIPs, but very grateful to be here, and I'll hand over to Greg.
Yeah, and likewise, really happy to be here and looking forward to having a good conversation and getting questions. So as the screen says, Greg Phillimore, Director at Camargue. I've been working on NSIPs now right since the early days of when the Planning Act first came into force. So way back when 2009, and also bring a breadth of experience. So linear projects crossing multiple boundaries, single site projects, and also across sectors, so energy and water, airports and so on. So hopefully we can bring you some good reflections and good thoughts based on our experience.
This is us, Bonnie team. We're an independent agency. We were created, established, founded in 1987. So some people on the call remember that year well, others perhaps less so. But yeah, we'll be 40 years old next year, which is a landmark for us. As you say, Bonnie, we're employee owned. We changed the ownership in 2022, so that's a significant thing for us and very helpful. The map shows where our offices are. We've got 5 offices in the UK, 112 people. We're focused on UK work. We do bits and pieces internationally, but our heartland is England and Wales, and our heartland is helping clients effectively to get things built and to engage all the stakeholders that are relevant in those conversations, and do that in a positive and beneficial way. So we're going to talk about NSIPs, but our broader work, just for context, includes everything from strategic land and new settlements through to employment parks and commercial development, healthcare, leisure. We're pulling on quite a few different sectors for our overall experience. And then briefly, when we're not doing what we call the consenting work, the rest of Camargue's work is focused in more traditional, what you might call traditional PR areas, business to business positioning, reputation, marketplace, and brand building. So we're an integrated agency, and we come to this kind of conversation pulling on all of that experience. You've touched, Bonnie, briefly on some of the local stuff, but again, just for context and where it might or might not inform how people want to join the Q&A later. You mentioned life sciences in Foxton. We are very grateful to Tom, you, others in your team for really positive youth engagement, but also broader engagement on that. We work for Anglian Water. Greg will talk a little bit about that in the examples later. Some of our legacy work in the city goes back to the early days like CB1 and the station regeneration around Cambridge Station. And we're currently working on a strategic employment site, which is called Cambridge 25, which is on junction 25 of the A14, and several people on this call will be aware of it. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear and out there, just in case that informs any of the conversations later. But that's us, and that's what we bring, and that's the basis of our experience.
And then just briefly, last slide about us. Bonnie's already given a brief overview of some of the NSIP work that we have delivered. But as you can see there, you know, a whole range of sectors we've worked in. I think we've probably touched on all of the main national policy statement areas for national infrastructure. And that gives us a really broad perspective. You know, we do recognise that projects, there are sometimes similarities, but also great differences. The way in which you bring forward an offshore project, of course, is very different to say something like an onshore solar, which is different again from a major water project. So, you know, collectively across all of our projects and all of our offices, we've got a really broad perspective, and hopefully that can help in answering some questions today. We work at every stage of that NSIP process. So a lot of what we'll cover today will be in the pre-application space, so the engagement and the consultation. But actually, we work right the way through. So seeing the projects through into the application phase, through examination and so on, and then more recently, as some of these major projects have started achieving consent, we're now working with developers and seeing the projects through development and construction, which also brings quite exciting opportunities for comms. Ben's touched on, you know, as a communications consultancy, we're covering all sorts of things. So, you know, we're very much in that engagement space, but we are helping projects define their messaging, deliver their communications. We're working with them in a campaigning way, as well as the planning sense of things. So really bringing that communication side of things to the whole planning side of things. And then most importantly, you know, a key part of this NSIP process is the actual public consultation and stakeholder and engagement with stakeholders like yourself. So something that we do very, very clearly as well, the feedback management and the feedback assessment. So we've covered probably about 15 years of work there in 3 slides, but I hope that gives you a sense of, you know, what we're about and the strength and depth we bring. So Ben, back to you.
Yeah, I mentioned Bonnie at the top of the conversation. We thought it might be helpful to do a little bit of retrospective. I'm not quite sure what you know, knowledge, experienced individuals on the call will have. So forgive me if some of this is well known. But you know, the Planning Act came into existence originally 2008. We're going to talk about some of the changes that are just washing through under the current changing legislation. But the DCO regime was created by the Blair-Brown government largely because the UK was failing to deliver big infrastructure quickly. And the kind of poster child for that is Heathrow Terminal 4. Many delays, lots of hold-ups, lots of poor coordination of stakeholder interests. So the Blair-Brown government decided to grip that and to change things, and they created the 2008 Planning Act that gave, for the first time, development consent order DCO powers, which were a mechanism for not just compulsory acquisition, but also regulation and designation of planning. So it was a big change designed to streamline and accelerate. Over the last 15 years, it's worked well. The general consensus is that it's worked well. It provided that solution to delays and stuff not getting done. One of the risks we were facing in the UK was that our European rivals and competitors and other global competitors were jumping ahead. So there was a recognition that the UK needed to act and do something to get better at infrastructure consenting. I think by my count, we're about 170 DCOs that have now gone through the system. So there's a big body of evidence there, you know, and it's generally speaking viewed as a success story, but things did slow down. And there was a concern around stagnation, and the poster child for that particular one, and people may know this on the call, is the Lower Thames Crossing application. It took a very long time. It took about 4 truckloads to deliver all of the documentation to the planning inspectorate. You know, lots of verbiage, excessive de-risking by lawyers. You know, reams and reams of information, not streamlined, not efficient, and not helping examiners or ministers and secretaries of state to reach conclusions. So under the new Starmer-Burnham government, we've seen the bringing of new legislation, the Planning and Infrastructure Act, and crucially that emphasis on delivering national growth. You know, a decade of renewal. You can take your soundbite from wherever you want, but you know, effectively this government that is serious about infrastructure growth as part of future economic growth, which in turn fuels all the social and broader funding opportunities and policy responsibilities. So where we've got to effectively is a piece of legislation that has been around for a while, but it's just been given a big polish. and we're going to talk a little bit about what's changed and what that polish means in terms of the new 2025 Act. So, Greg, should we go to the next slide? Slight segue in case it's useful for people. I don't know who on the call might be familiar with National Infrastructure Planning Association. Greg mentioned it in the intro. It's a not-for-profit networking organization run by the industry, by people working in the sector to share knowledge, to collaborate. It gives a sounding board to government and MHCLG. It provides policy and consultation responses. And it's a very, very good way to either learn more or to share more about DCO. So this is not an advert for NIPA. You can make your own decisions about whether you see any value for you and your team about getting involved. But they do two big things each year: a conference, which has just happened. Greg can touch on some of that, and various other regional events alongside the headline dinner. We're members. As I say, Greg is on the council. I was previously on the council, but I would recommend have a look at that if you're interested in all things to do with NSIPs, and or you have some experience but might like to know more. NIPA is a very good way to do that and to get more plugged in.
Yeah. Just a further note for NIPA. We will move on, I promise. But it's yeah. I mean, I echo what Ben has said there. It is a forum for good practice, for engagement. Something that we're working on at the moment, and something I'm involved in as part of my work on the council, is actually trying to get greater engagement at the local government level. I think we're in the NSIP place. A lot of focus has been on the developers, the applicants who bring forward the projects, but of course the NSIP regime puts a big requirement on local authorities. They're important consultees. You have a role to play in bringing the projects forward, both in the pre-app phase, but also then of course when projects move into delivery. So to date, NIP has been, I think, largely been in that legal and applicant sector, but actually is more and more, we're seeing more and more public sector involvement. So as Ben says, make your own judgment, but you can take a look at what NIP is doing. You don't have to come to the events. They're good ways to get involved, but actually there's lots of stuff online as well. So perhaps after this call, do take a moment to look at it. Okay, I look forward then. I guess, and really what the thrust of this meeting is all about, this call, is to try and say, well, look, what are our reflections? What does NSIP delivery involve? And I think the headline is captures that, a focus on good engagement. Ben reflected on the history of major projects. The whole intention with the NSIP process is that unlike, say, at a local level where you make your planning application and then issues, concerns, benefits are dealt with after the application, in the NSIP process everything happens prior to application, and often over many years. These are, by their very nature, these are sizable projects with big points to cover and decisions to be made. So that engagement phase can sometimes take place. We've worked on projects where the pre-application engagement can sometimes be as long as 4 or 5 years as projects work through development and evolution. And the key principle really is that you developers share their projects at an early stage where they can be influenced. You encourage feedback, you seek opinion, and then projects are then influenced by their projects. The intention being, by the time you get to your application, of course, you've understood what the issues are. Your project's been influenced and has evolved in response to stakeholders and communities. Of course, there are always residual issues. They're then dealt with at an examination phase. But because of that pre-application stage being such an important part of the process, it's that really makes the engagement with communities, with stakeholders, as such an important part of the process. So the sorts of things that we would be looking at then for stakeholder engagement. A key first step, of course, when you look at your project, you look at your project geography, is understanding who your stakeholders are. To a certain extent, some of those will define themselves. There are stakeholders that are prescribed by planning regulation, as you may know, so statutory undertakers, local authorities, and so on. So you are duty bound to engage with those organisations. So and given the size and scale of some of these projects, isn't necessarily just one local authority. I'll come on to the Anglian Water Fens project is one I work on, but that includes 7 district councils, for example, such as the extent of it. Ben mentioned the Lower Thames Crossing, not one we work on, but again, that crosses multiple boundaries. So defining who your stakeholders are and really understanding who they are is a key part of the process. And that, in good practice, that should really extend to what's happening in the local geography as well. So in many of the projects that Camargue work on, a big part of those early stages is really getting to understand who those stakeholders are. So who are the local special interest groups? What are the themes and issues that are important to particular areas? What's the local economy all about? Because, say, for example, something that is inland, you might have agriculture as a big part of a local economy. Something that's coastal, of course, you're bringing into fisheries. Something that's city-based, again, a more diverse economy. All of these types of activities, the type of geography, can inform who your stakeholders are, and then importantly inform how you're going to engage with those stakeholders. So a lot of that work in the early stages of the NSIP process is getting a lot of buzz in the background. Maybe someone's got their mic open. There we go. Thanks very much. So yeah, as I say, identify the stakeholders and then define how you want to engage with them. So you might wanting to be talking to them about the project as a whole. It might be an issue specific engagement, and the types of structures that we see brought forward. Sometimes you'll engage with those stakeholders through special interest groups or forums. Not unusual for projects to develop a very focused forum around particular issues, environment, heritage, those sorts of things. Sometimes you might engage with them just on the phases of consultation. So there's no particular hard and fast rule here, but lots of good practice around how stakeholder engagement should be structured. But the important thing is taking those stakeholders with you, seeking their professional input, seeking their professional opinion, because they know the area, they know how a project might have impacts and benefits. Understanding communities, a huge part of our work at Camargue is involved in this space, and actually bringing communities with you as you develop a project. And let's be honest, that can be challenging. While there are many benefits, of course, all major infrastructure projects will bring benefits, whether that's net zero or water resilience or road capacity, rail capacity, all these sorts of things. There is always going to be a benefit from national infrastructure, but of course there are also impacts, and the way in which those impacts and benefits are felt differ greatly. And for the communities who host these major projects, often in the early days, it can be that sense of impacts. This project is coming our way. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for how we can influence projects? So the Planning Act, as was now the Planning and Infrastructure Act, places a real emphasis on bringing communities with you, engaging with communities, often for the same purpose. What we're trying to seek here is what do you see as the possibilities? What do you see as the benefits? How can this project serve you as an area, as a region? But importantly, what are the impacts? You live and work in this area. What does that mean for you? How do you travel about? What can we do? What areas are important to you? Is that because they have a particular place that's important to the community? Is there something there that we wouldn't pick up through our environmental assessments? So you're really looking to build that understanding with the communities, understand who they are, engage with them, but most importantly, understand what's important to them. And all of that engagement, the technical stakeholder engagement, the community engagement, you're gathering information, you're gathering feedback all of the time and feeding that in through the development process. And typically, we will be engaging over 2, 3, sometimes even 4 major periods of project evolution as we go through. So that last bullet, if I just ask everyone to just quickly go on mute, please. It's getting a little bit of background noise. So up to now, the old Planning Act actually put a legal duty on applicants to undertake those activities, so that I think it's good practice anyway, but there has been a legal duty to consult. What that has tended to lead to, Ben reflected on this in his previous slide, was actually it got into a rhythm where good practice was there, but applicants were beginning to follow the process, beginning to follow the guidelines, perhaps being a little guilty of ticking boxes and giving themselves legal protection. The Planning and Infrastructure Act has brought a new freedom. It's done away with the legal requirement to consult, the actual duty to consult, and has now made it still a really key part of the pre-application process. But by relieving applicants of that legal duty, they hope to create a freedom, create a bit of flexibility, where actually we can focus more on the direct engagement and what we're seeing, and the Act is only a few months old, and the guidelines that go with it even more recent, just the last 2 or 3 weeks. We're seeing a movement now, much more focus on issues, really understand what the issues are, really understand what stakeholders and communities want projects to address on. And I think if we could capture it in that sense of a couple of sentences, perhaps previously under the Planning Act, it was how do we consult and when do we consult, to now is who are we engaging with and what can we learn. And I think actually that while that might sound quite similar, it might sound a choice of words, actually the feeling is different. And we're already seeing some of our projects, our clients beginning to talk to us about what does this new Planning and Infrastructure Act world mean? How can we engage? How can we be more agile? And that's what the direction from government is get on with projects, get things sped up, don't get yourself bogged down into legal frameworks, move forward, work with communities and get these projects get delivered for the benefit of the economy. So a couple of case studies then. So Fens Reservoir, I hope most of you on this call will know about that, certainly in your patch. So a major new reservoir project being brought forward by Anglian Water. This is one of the biggest projects that certainly Camargue has ever worked on. I would say probably up there with NSIPs in the UK as well right now. So a new reservoir, and importantly, all of its connecting infrastructure as well. So the reservoir itself is a significant undertaking, but there are pipelines bringing water to the reservoir. There are pipelines taking water into the region as well to supply Cambridgeshire. This is being done in partnership with Cambridge Water. So the needs case of the project is very much tied to growth ambition in and around Cambridge, making sure the water is there for future generations. So we've been working on this project from the outset, and I think this really stands out actually as a project that has really gone about things in the right way. So things we are doing, first and foremost, there's a huge, quite aside from the planning side of things, there's a really important communications exercise. So we've worked really hard through Anglian Water and Cambridge Water's direction to actually begin to build up an understanding of what the project is, why is it needed, what benefits can it bring for the region. And with a reservoir, those benefits are not just water resilience, that's a key part, but it can be public health benefits, it can be environmental benefits, recreation, it can be creating new skills and jobs in the region. So the communications campaign actually started way ahead of the planning campaign. That's then given way into a more formal consultation process. So far, we've done 3 major stages of consultation, each one beginning to bring something more forward. So very first consultation back in 2022, that was the site selection. So we have identified a site. Here's where we're going to be building the reservoir, but work with the stakeholders, communities, tell us what's important to you. What can you tell us about this area? The next consultation then introduced the associated infrastructure, so the pipelines that I've referred to, and then the third consultation, which was last autumn, we've got into more detail about the actual design of the reservoir, the features, the facilities, the economic and environmental benefits that can be brought forward for the project, and then beginning to get through into more detail. So actually, how will we build the project? What does that mean for construction traffic? What does that mean for impacts on local roads? How can we use rail? So some of these topics, you can begin to see why a major project has to evolve over several years. That particularly this Fens Reservoir project, the evolution from a site into the infrastructure, now into actually how we would build it, the road, the rail, and so on. So, and each time we're engaging with stakeholders and communities in different ways. So, a sizable project and still one more consultation to go, and in parallel, continual engagement. So a whole program of technical working groups where we're engaging with the statutory bodies, so in this area, the internal drainage boards, but also, as you'd expect, Historic England, the Environment Agency, who are responsible for the existing waterways. We've got Network Rail involved because of rail work. We're obviously consulting with the local authorities and like the highways bodies and stuff. So many different considerations to develop the project. And then that community consultation, community engagement happens as well. So major stages of consultation, and in between, community liaison groups, community outreach. We've just started doing some schools outreach as well to help bring knowledge and familiarity with the project. So you can see one project brings with it a whole myriad of considerations and a huge program of stakeholder engagement. I wanted to focus on that one. I felt it was probably, of all our projects, one that is probably live and one you might all be familiar with. Briefly then, a very different type of project. This is one of our projects up in North Wales and Cheshire. So as you can see there, for BP and ENBW as a joint developer, this has involved the development of 3 offshore wind farms, and also then the connection to connect those wind farms to the grid. So this is an interesting one because actually it's 4 separate projects, so therefore 4 separate applications, but we've dealt with it in a communication and engagement and consultation method, all things in parallel. And that's been our communication challenge, is how do we bring these projects forward as projects in their own right, but actually they have shared infrastructure, they have many of the similar benefits and impacts. So that's been the decision on that project, is to take that forward, and all of the engagement and all of the stakeholder planning has been done with how do we bring that forward. And again, a good example of the size and scale of major infrastructure projects. It's been all of the counties across North Wales into Cheshire and the Wirral as well. So you're engaging with multiple different stakeholders, multiple different communities. And an interesting one here, of course, because this is a marine project, so brings in those marine stakeholders and marine considerations, all of which needs to be played out through that process of pre-application consultation and engagement. I feel like I could talk all day about NSIP projects, but I hope that gives you just what the intention is for the planning process and how that's been brought to bear in a couple of our most recent projects. So just to bring things to a close, some insights, I guess, things to leave you with, and Ben, I'll hand back to you here to
final slide,
share
everyone.
our thinking.
Yeah, we've been powering on. We get quite excited about this stuff, as you can probably tell, but just some final kind of insights, reflections, maybe some questions to prompt and provoke a little bit more thinking that you may wish to do, or questions. Much of this is, you might say, fairly self-evident, but it's really important to focus on the principles of understanding your community, listening to your community, and then, as Greg has touched on, the new guidance under the Planning and Infrastructure Act is not about what you need to do to be compliant. It's about what you can do to improve your project. So it starts with the issues that are relevant to a community. It starts with what does that community want and need from you as an applicant. It doesn't start with you and the lawyer sitting down going, what do we need to do to meet the threshold for acceptance and achieve the things that we're being told to do. So I won't go through all of this, but the main things are understand the community, clarity of story, clarity of narrative. I think that's really important for any change project. But where we're talking about being transparent, that clarity needs to come with a realistic understanding of what's up for grabs, what can be changed, what are you asking a community to actually help shape or form, because quite a lot of this stuff is, to be honest, quite technical, and you can't necessarily get a member of the local community to design your kind of power generator, but you do need to talk to them about landscape impact or visual. So these things are all important. Greg's going to take us home, and then we'll get to questions, Bonnie, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and then just to round us off then. So I think our reflections, and no surprise that the communications people say keep the communications going, but actually there's a really important intent behind that. The way in which projects have been structured, certainly in these first 15 years of the NSIP process, have been around major milestones of consultation, and then a project will go off and it will do its development phase, and we'll see you again in a year's time. Well, for communities, that's a huge length of time, actually. You know, what's happening? What are you doing behind closed doors? So we always encourage all of our projects, look, keep the communication going. There are always good and interesting stories that are coming from a project, whether that's the environmental assessment or tell us more about the people involved in the project. Tell us more about how you're getting on, and keep people up to date. Because if you don't, you get information voids, and that's when concern can feed in. So something that's always really important is not just the consultation, but how do you continue the engagement? Opposition, you know, a very real point of many major infrastructure projects. You know, they do bring impacts, and understandably they do raise concerns. You know, we've got a great deal of experience of working with campaign groups which form in response to projects. Just because they're against your project doesn't make them any less legitimate. In fact, if anything, really important to engage with those groups, because at the heart of their opposition actually is often very profound concerns. So look, you know, dig into that. What is it that where can we find common ground? How can we address and understand your concerns? And you might not be able to meet exactly in the middle, but a sharing of views, a sharing of opinions is always valuable and always worthwhile. And then, you know, I think probably this is our resounding point. These are huge projects that are incredibly complex, made up of all sorts of technical and engineering detail. That's great for the engineers, but for most people involved, actually, you need to work in the headlines. You need to keep this simple. You need to find ways of engaging people, and bogging people down with lots of technical detail is not the way to do it. So in all of our project delivery, we're always encouraging our projects to say, look, let's bring this up a level. Let's think about how people will engage, the levels of information they're looking for. And again, that's for the benefit of everyone. If people can get on board, understand the project, they're more likely to engage, and then you're more likely to get to that planning process unscathed. So there we are.
Yes, Bonnie,
Yeah.
I hope that's okay. I think we probably overtalked our time a little bit, but got a little bit carried away. But yeah, back to you, and very happy to answer any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Ben, for highlighting in particular the changes to the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025. Before we take any questions, can I ask everybody to switch on the camera so I can take a screenshot, smile, because this will be on LinkedIn and our website. Mary, are you there? Okay, you look nice anyway. That screenshot. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I'm going to put in the chat box, and questions, please. I'm going to start with Maxine.
Yeah, that was a really interesting talk, so thank you for that. I was going to say I actually organise quite a lot of events, and we're going through that process at the moment for the local plan. So what you've said is really good. The way you can engage with, you know, community groups and residents and so on, it's really, really good. Yeah, but I haven't got any questions.
Okay. I have a question. So in terms of that change introduced to the Planning and Infrastructure Act 2025, you mentioned the key changes being finding out from the local communities what they want and lessons learned. Can you just remind me, is there still a legal requirement to consult, or is no longer a legal requirement?
So that's the key change, Bonnie. Yeah, I'll come into that one, Ben. So yeah, previously there was two key legal checks. There's a legal duty to consult, and then a legal duty to have regard to feedback, and certain sections of the Act told developers how to consult. That's gone. There is now no longer a legal duty to consult. It's absolutely the opposite. And the latest guidance says, you know, consultation or lack of will not be a determining factor in whether an application is accepted. So it's really clear from government, you know, you don't need to do that. However, the government is also very clear, saying while there's no legal duty, we fully expect the pre-application phase to feature good engagement, to feature working with stakeholders, communities, get to the issues, understand what's important. So it will be a brave developer to do no engagement and consultation and go straight to application. So no legal duty, gives some freedom, gives some flexibility, but clearly a real focus on engagement still.
Yeah, and I think what I'd just add to that briefly, Bonnie, is the government wants to go faster That's the whole point of getting these things consented, to deliver the benefit of the project, but also to deliver the national economic opportunities. And so this isn't about just pushing all the issues into the examination and pushing it all up to the Secretary of State to ultimately make the decision. There is still a strong emphasis that the developer should sort that out before they bring it for examination. And I think that's only a good thing.
Thank you. Tom Davis.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation. Yeah, I mean, focused on Chatteris and water scarcity is probably the biggest headache for our planning policy team after the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's challenging, isn't it? I mean, residents are going to ask, well, when is this reservoir going to be ready? It's difficult to really pinpoint a precise. Yeah. And I mean, you're both very impressive because you're both very articulate and fluent, and not everyone's got that really. I've got a weakness of sort of like starting every sentence when I'm talking to the residents of sort of saying, "Oh, it's my understanding that," or sort of subject to the policy constraints and these obstacles being overcome. So it makes a difference, doesn't it, to be engaging, to chat to people easily and convey the messages. And I was wondering, well, I mean, we're having local government review in the autumn, and Angela Rayner's back, and that's going to mean different, wider territories. And I mean, the nature of national infrastructure projects, they're large, aren't they? They cover a wide area. I mean, there's also talk about like mayors having more power and sort of operating on a more wider area of that city regions. I mean, do you think that will make your jobs easier, having like larger local authority areas?
I think maybe I'll take a crank at that, Greg. I mean, I think that change is challenging, Tom. So I think there's some complexities there, aren't there? And people need time to understand a new system, and crucially, they need to trust a process. And we talk about that a lot with DCOs. You might not like the project, but you need to trust and have confidence in the process. So I think with LGR as it flows through, people do need to properly understand how they as a citizen can contribute, but also what are their elected representatives doing, and what are their technical planning specialists and other advisors doing, and how does everyone kind of ultimately align to make the decisions that are relevant and needed. So yeah, I think it is challenging. I'm slightly picking up on one of your other points, and I'll say it anyway, but we've never been an agency that wants to pit one side against another, and Greg's kind of touched on this. We see our job as to be more of a facilitator and to help a conversation. We don't go into communities to sell to them. We go in to listen and to understand and to bring things together. So I think there's a combination of things. There's the process and the trust in the process, and then there's a kind of empathy and a humanity to how you actually engage with people and make it clear what the benefit of engaging is.
Yeah, I'd agree with. Sorry, Bonnie.
Right.
Just quickly about Tom's point. I think it really interesting to see what happens with local government reform. One area we're interested in is actually there's more work now happening with spatial planning, and actually how do regions organise themselves. And we're seeing you mentioned about the mayoralties, but also local authorities organising themselves. So I would hope in some respects that make things easier. Sometimes it can feel like certain areas get a huge concentration of projects, others not so. So in that spatial planning element, together with the local government reform, I hope for more clarity in infrastructure intention.
Yeah, so we've since had Mary Collins and Adam joining us. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course, my name is Adam, Planning Officer at Greater Cambridgeshire Planning. I used to be an advisor on what was it? I used to be on the DCO on the DCO side and for a construction firm. So I used to have to interpret it from the other side of the fence. So it's actually quite interesting doing it from the planning authority side for a change. I had a question I wanted to ask, if that's all right. This is more of just a general procedural, so forgive me if it's a bit technical or if it has been answered already. So, but I didn't catch this earlier in the conversation. So I just wanted to ask, have you dealt with with the procedure of non-material changes or material changes to a DCO, and what that has to involve regarding was it regarding regarding how to address new consultations and how that should be dealt with the local community?
So I'm happy to take this one because I have.
Thank you.
So, and to share, and I won't tell you which project it is, but because there's some sensitivities around that. But
that's fine.
But,
I mean, for what it's worth, in the history, I used to work on the one I used to work for was the Daventry International Rail Freight Terminal.
Yeah.
So it was Duft. I was on Duft.
Me too. Well, Ben worked on Duft. So.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Small world.
Exactly. It's a small world. So I think, Adam, yes. So I have worked on a project where feedback led the project to make a change, and that change moved outside of the order limits of as it was. So a bit more of a technical answer, but moving outside the order limits. So the two decisions the project made is, is it in taking us into new areas of land where landowners are affected. We haven't touched really on landowners, but really important consultees. Is the environmental impact materially different as well? And those two key points, and this really is a decision that sits with the lawyers. Those two key points led us to do further targeted consultation in the areas where the impacts were. What's interesting now, again, back to this new Planning Infrastructure Act world, the government don't want projects to get into a phase of saying, oh, we've consulted, we've made a change, oh, we're consulting again, we've made a change. This constant stasis of consultation. So just reflecting on a meeting I was at with the planning inspectorate only last week, the material change is still in there in the wording, but the planning inspectorate guidance then was, we expect this to be material. So we are looking at significant impacts here. We're not looking at small changes and things like that. And even if you're maybe slightly out the order limits, you may be able to deal with that through a process of information and would perhaps deal with it examination if we have to. So even the inspectorate now are given the signal, find ways to move forward, do it properly, do it with respect to consultees and in communities, but don't tie yourself up in procedural knots. So I think it's changing, is the honest answer, is that it has been dealt with by the letter of the law. And I sense, again, an intention from government to want to speed that process up. Is that helpful? Does that answer the question about material change?
No, it is. I mean, does that would part of that definition in terms of a threshold be a material change or a non-material change, or is it more complicated than that in terms of the legality?
You need to look at it.
Fair enough.
I'm not a lawyer or a consenting. This is. I think this is reflective. We're communications people, but get involved in planning stuff as well. That's the gig. But it'd be a case by case basis. I guess what I'm saying is what I sensed from the inspectorate was it would need to be a significant material change. But that doesn't necessarily mean a huge geography. Material change, if you've got an important heritage site, for instance, that might prompt you into further consultation. It will be case by case basis.
Okay, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to Ben and Greg for the very high quality CPD. We're so grateful to have leading voices joining our team, and we will be. Yep, thank you. We will be uploading this video on our ICPG website, which is founded by Heather Jones, the Deputy Planning Director for Planning. We will be having an Inclusive Design Festival in January, February. So hopefully we'll keep Carmark posted. So definitely want to get you involved, part of the conversation, you're a key partner for Greater Cambridgeshire Planning. So we'll stay in touch. Any further questions can be sent to me, and then I can send to Greg and Ben. But thank you all for joining us. It's been really, really insightful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for joining as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.